The food stopped being my problem as soon as I discovered drinking drugs. It was hard to be bulimic and be an overeater and be so focused on food. Conveniently, I'd found another substance that made me feel better. No calories in drugs. And the blood clot could get bigger and move to my heart or my brain and I would die. So, I was dicing, I was dancing all the time with the danger of death, but it wasn't stopping me using. So it had these consequences that would scare me, but I would just dodge them because no matter what, I was going to carry on using. First came into meetings full of guilt and shame and secrecy and I'm disgusting. But hearing people talk about this madness, I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. It was huge.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Vicky. Hi Vicky, thank you so much for being my guest today on 12 Steps and 12 Questions.
Hi, my absolute pleasure, Silvio.
I'd like to very quickly, before we get to your introduction, I'd like to thank everybody who's downloaded and listened to this podcast. I've received really, really wonderful feedback. Thank you so much. I'd be super grateful if you could quickly give us a review on whichever platform you're listening to. It really helps to spread the message, helps me and those pesky algorithms to work their 12th step. So thank you very much if you could do that. And let's get right to it. Vicky, would you like to introduce yourself quickly, please?
My name's Vicky and I'm an addict. I am 53 years old and I got clean and sober at 48. So I'm almost 5 years.
Wow, wonderful.
Touching a substance or a drink.
Yeah, amazing. I also got in at 48. So late bloomer, better late than never, I suppose.
Exactly.
Let's get right to it. And question one, which is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
Not at all in my childhood. My only thing in my childhood I can remember is that I just was fat. And that's not a nice word, but in my head I was fat and I hated myself. But I clearly made myself fat by just eating. So I must have eaten a lot as a kid, probably had a feeder as a grandma. And it wasn't okay to be fat in my family or in my own head. So there was a lot of dieting as a kid. There was a lot of feeling big, I'm not like my friends. A lot of kind of put a face on because don't be fat and annoying. Don't be fat and have an opinion. But I had a really happy, sunshiny, beautiful childhood. We'd go camping. I've got a brother. We lived in Yorkshire. Just a really golden, beautiful childhood from what I can remember, and there's nothing different. For me, it was more in my teenage years where my mum had a lump in her breast, which was fine. We've still got my mum, but that was pretty traumatic. My dad, I think, was doing this thing. He'd also lost a huge amount of money on the crash of some stock market crash in the 80s. I had started my periods really late at about 17. So there's a real strange sweet spot of about a year in maybe I was 16. And I just remember being the biggest, I'm not going to say fattest, the biggest weight I'd ever been. I was about 16 stone at that point. And for me, it was quite traumatic because I was constantly, it wasn't good for me, it wasn't good for my health. I was constantly feeling like less than, constantly feeling disgusting, but eating more. So I think a short answer to your question is I just mainly made a trauma for myself made an uncomfortable situation for myself by eating my feelings. I think, my first addiction certainly was food, secret eating. And then I crash dieted, which was terrible for my state of mind, terrible for my health. It was the 80s, no one knew that it wasn't good to have 500 calories a day. But one summer, I think maybe between doing O-levels, they were called in my day, between GCSEs and sixth form, I went, right, I'm going on holiday with my mate this summer. I need to have a boy to fancy me because I lived in fantasy. I wanted to go out with the guys in Duran Duran. I wanted to be on I fell in love with everybody in the soap operas. I had a real big fantasy world. And I just was like, I'm missing life. I want to have a boyfriend. Da, da, da. I was sort of 16 going on 12 probably at this point in my head. And I went on a massive crash diet and I lost about 4 stone in 4 months. And the change of that, because I was still the same person in my head, but on the outside, I'd become this woman like Brittany. I was not a girl and I wasn't a woman, but people saw me as this, I was pretty, I thought. Suddenly I was pretty. I was getting male attention and it was too much. I suddenly grew up too quickly. I was taking it on. I was doing it, but then I was binging on that at night. But I didn't want to lose my slim shape, my normal, in quote, shape. So I'd binge and I'd purge. And then I had about 3 years of really secret bulimia, which was, looking back, it was horrific. I was skiving school, skiving my sixth form, and I purged with laxatives. I mean, it was not nice. It's a long process and it's uncomfortable. And you've got to go somewhere and be somewhere and, it's toilets and it's department stores and it's really, it's super secret and it's horrible.
Yeah.
And I'd be dodging seeing my dad around maybe with this woman. I think it was, that for me was my trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly bulimia was not a nice thing.
From what you were saying, it sounds as if you already had awareness about your weight and about feeling uncomfortable with your weight at a really early age. I mean, in childhood, really.
Yeah, definitely in childhood. I remember I was in junior school still.
What sort of age is that?
Like 10. I did a thing where I was a lunch server. Like a few of us were picked. He felt really popular. He'd serve the lunch out to the tables. But then you could eat the school dinners. You could just eat your own portion of school dinners. And my mum was called by school to say, come in, we're really worried about the amount of food Victoria's eating. And she said, this happened. So I was definitely overeating then and definitely was big then. And we'd be like, let's go on a diet, so it was constantly, you can't eat that much. You need to go on a diet. And I would cheat and I'd secret eat and midnight eat. So that was from about the age of 10. But before that, I'd eaten enough to become a chubby child, Don't know why or how, but it just was.
Yeah. So many hallmarks of addiction in there, I suppose, secretive eating and all the shame and all of that, or a precursor really.
And the shame and the guilt of doing it. And then you just eat more to make that better. Like I've only realised that from getting sober and doing the work that we do in the 12 steps. To go, oh yeah, it seems like the most insane thing to do, to eat more when you're not meant to be eating because you feel guilty about eating, you just eat more. In a similar way to, in the next 30 years, because I put bulimia down, I put food down. Like, I'll emotionally eat now, but I can flag it and I can spot it. But food stopped being my problem as soon as I discovered drinking drugs. It's hilarious. Talk about moving addiction, talk about moving substances, I just left that. But it was hard to be bulimic and be an overeater and be so focused on food when I was like, right, I'm doing life now. I'm doing college. I'm with a DJ. I want to do life now. Like it didn't fit because it was inconvenient. And conveniently, I'd found another substance that, made me, we're jumping ahead now massively, but I'd found another substance that made me feel better, which was booze, booze and drugs. So woohoo, no calories in drugs. But there is in booze.
Plenty of those in booze.
Yeah.
But let's jump ahead, as you said, and get over to question 2, which is, what did the fun times look like? The times where you got hooked. So you just spoke about the fact that here you are, you've come from being bulimic and from having weight issues and self-confidence issues and all of that, and you've become this young woman now and you find this quote-unquote other solution. What did that look like?
So probably mid-teens, I probably drank at a school friend's party, but drank to blackout for sure. So I was frightened of booze, and I was a goody-goody at home, chronic people pleaser, and I had food as my substance really. So I didn't really drink that much while I was still at home. I would, but I don't remember it being I wouldn't really look at the booze in my mum and dad's house. Like my parents were partiers actually. They weren't by any means alcoholics. But my dad loved music. He always taped to the top 40. He always made a mixtape. The parties were at our house at New Year, and it was all about music and pop music and parties. And everyone got drunk and pissed, but I don't feel like there were any alcoholics in my midst, certainly not in my family. So my life was, drink was fun. It was party time. And when I went to parties, I would drink, and I would drink too much immediately. So I'd be like, right, that scared me, because I got scared of the lack of control. And, I'd be maybe 18, 19 and out in a bar in my hometown, and I had a bigger brother who was my idol, and he was in bands and he was super cool and he smoked weed. And, he'd have to drive me home in his van and I'm being sick out of the window. And only once did that happen. It scared me too much. So when I was still living at home, I knew that drink was amazing and it was making me, it was exciting, but leaving home. And then I could look to drive quite late. So then I was designated driver. That was the fun bit. Maybe I'd go on holiday and drink, but it was always like the forbidden fruit. It was always a bit like the exciting thing, which I was holding back on really, because I didn't want to get in too much trouble. I was fearful, actually. Fearful because I almost, looking back, I think I almost knew where it would take me, because it would always take me to blackout. So I would kind of leave it alone a bit. And I had food. Like I said, I had food as my thing that made me feel better. So then I left home and I'd probably smoked a spliff, but because I drank quite a lot, I was immediately having a whitey, And I was always the one that was eating Slim Fast shakes for lunch, because I was still trying to diet and not really bulimic anymore, but I was still majorly, crash dieting, extreme dieting, but drinking a lot so that I'd get the calories some way. But I'd be the one in the corner, passed out because I wouldn't have eaten much, and I'd drink loads, and, I was the loser in the corner having passed out. So I was trying to get the mix right, drank a lot, a bit of weed, I liked the weed, long and the short of it. As soon as I put something in me like that, all that tension and all that uncomfortability in my skin just slipped away. You hear it all the time, don't you? But I didn't even realise that's why I liked it so much. But that's definitely why I liked it so much, because my shoulders could drop and I could just be okay with being me, or okay with what I thought you thought of me, or that all went away. And then when I was about 21, I was frightened of drugs. I had a couple of friends at college who were doing pills. One friend only, actually, doing pills, and it was Leah Betts' year.
Oh, yeah.
And for those who are listening who are younger than me, Leah Betts was a story in the news. One girl died from doing pills. She died of too much water, actually, on her kidneys or something for doing pills. But it was in the headlines. It was big thing in the 90s, early 90s, this Leah Betts girl who died from pills. So I was really scared of pills. But I had drink and an odd spliff, it was fine. But I met this DJ, or met this guy. I worked in a restaurant when I was at college, and they were all serving up, weed and Coke, and I always said no to Coke. I was just too scared. And I had drink and I had weed, it was fine. And I met this DJ, this guy that happened to be a DJ, and he definitely was what I thought I wanted to be with. And he dealt weed to the young lads that came in the record shop. And I was immediately hooked on him and started to smoke weed every day with him. And one night he's like, right, I've got some Coke. Do you want a line of Coke? I'm like, oh, I never tried it. He's like, come on, no, let's do some Coke. I was like, okay. And I hoofed up this line. I was scared. This is me being scared of drugs, but I wanted to fit in. Of course, I'm saying yes, fearfully, doing it against my will, really. But I want to fit in and I want to be cool. So I'm like, yeah. Let's do a line. So I hoof up this big line, and I couldn't, but I thought, yeah, immediately. I said, can I have another one? Like, immediately. He's like, just let it take effect. Just it's subtle. Wait a minute. And I actually remember thinking, was that all it was? I remember thinking, yes, that's a line of Coke. But I don't remember feeling like I really wanted this mind-blowing, euphoric experience. Which then I was chasing. And then I found that, the more I had, the more I would get that. And the more, I think if I was drunker, then it would have that sort of titrating effect. And so for the first line I took, in answer to your question, first line of Coke I took, I wanted more. I wanted it all the time. And I did have it all the time from that first line.
Did that progress fairly quickly then?
Yeah, it was in my life. The only thing that happened was, it was in my life and I'd do it as often as I possibly could. I was in that world anyway. We didn't have much money, but somebody always had pills or Coke or something. We'd do it at the weekends. I'd smoke weed every day, but we'd go out because he'd be DJing or we'd be going to some night. And so for a few years, every weekend was cocaine, half pill, bit of MDMA. You know, it was wonderful. I loved it because I loved the music. I loved the scene. I don't remember that girl. I don't remember who I was by any means. I was just lost in oblivion, and I loved it.
Isn't it interesting that we look back at this and to us it's totally normal, right? So you're saying that you smoked more or less every day. You took pills or MDMA or coke every weekend. And I'm just sitting here kind of going, yeah. It's not normal. You know, it's not what most people do. And it is clearly problematic using, I suppose, you know, when you use every day like that. Did you have I didn't have any awareness around this at the time at all. Did you?
No. Because I was with the same people, the people of the same, that everyone was doing it. And, you know, even when I was a student, I thought everyone was drinking like me. Like I would drink a quarter bottle of vodka or Bacardi, smoke about 20 fags while getting ready to go out on a weeknight. And that's every night, every student night. Every night of the week was a student night. But no, I don't think anybody else was drinking that before they went out. But I just normalised it because I was like, oh, everyone's doing it. I had no option, but that's what I was doing. You know, I was doing that and I continued to do that and more for the next 30 years. No, not for a minute did I think, A, it was illegal. B, it was anything strange about it. And that was me only doing it at weekends or every other weekend. You know, that went on to every day. And didn't think, there was no part of me that thought, wow, this is bad, until much, much later. Much later, literally the year that I came into recovery. Because I think the minute I could acknowledge, oh, I've got a problem, then I'd have to look at something. There's no way I wanted to look at something. And I probably used more on the fact that, oh God, maybe I've got a problem. Make all that feeling go away by having a drink or having a line or having a spliff or buying something or sleeping with somebody. You know, didn't know any of that until I came into the stuff that we do.
Yeah. So question 3, and I am aware that we are going to cover quite a long span here. I mean, you spoke of 30 years and that, I suppose those 30 years are a whole podcast.
It's a long time.
Themselves, you know?
Yeah.
But question 3 is, what were your worst consequences? And finally, your rock bottom. And I'll caveat this again, not everybody has one. And you may have many, and you might not even come into the rooms on the back of a rock bottom. So caveating that a little bit, but still, what were your worst consequences? And finally, your rock bottom.
You see, at the time, I ignored all the consequences until I had health consequences. Like probably, really, in hindsight, the consequences that I was ignoring would have been having to borrow money, getting into real, you know, agonising debt, which probably made me use more on the stress of all that debt and that. Getting loans and flipping loans, borrowing stuff, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I stole a lot, actually. That was a little addiction I had when I was younger. Did a lot of stealing money. That didn't strike me as a consequence, though. That just was all part of it, because no matter what, I was doing it, you know. I'd probably, you know, mess up so much in a job for being so unmanageable, not ever thinking it was the drink or the drugs. But I'd leave jobs or I'd get made redundant because really I was the one that needed to go. So consequences that I was ignoring were things like losing jobs, leaving jobs, just unmanageability. But I got off pretty scot-free until the health stuff came in. And, oh God, in about 2015, 16, I was getting chest pains. And I was like, oh, Jesus. And
Scary.
Well, scary, but also like I was gutted because I thought, no way, I don't want to cut down or give up, you know. And you hear people all the time say, I just wanted to die, you know, suicide attempts and stuff. I was the opposite. I did not want to die. I thought my life was fantastic. And also, if I did die or, you know, want to shuffle off this mortal coil, my mother would find out. Like I led the secret life. I led this double life, and I didn't want anyone to find out. So there's no way I wanted to die. But
that makes me laugh a little bit because just kind of spin that forward just for a sec. You know, because if you did die using, yes, your mum would find out, but you wouldn't be there to get telling off. No. So, you know, I love those fears that we have. I have plenty of those drinking and using. Really weird stuff. Yeah.
I couldn't do it to her. Yeah. So I didn't want to die, but I did not want to stop using. No way, no how. So when I had the chest pains, I was like, oh God. Yeah, I mean, clearly scary. I probably used it on that as well because, we realised that we use on fear, or self-medicate, probably drank on it more than used. So that health consequence meant that I was getting my heart checked. I was then with a cardiologist and I was getting my heart checked and they're just going, yeah, your heart seems all right, but it is really like you need to cut down now because it's like Russian roulette. Your heart's kind of okay, but you need to tailor in the amount you're using, and for the amount of years you've been using, you will die.
So you did tell them that you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. I was constantly going to doctors going, I was almost too honest. Like, even in the bulimic times, I go to the doctors going, oh God, I think my bowel's packed in, I'm using, So I was very, very disclosure. I was constantly disclosing stuff to people that I knew, were safe. So even though the cardiologist was like, you need to stop, I think I took that as I have got 9 lives and I'm going to use them. And subconsciously thought, oh, I'm being all right. That's okay then. But I did actually stop. Oh, and I went to Goa and I had got a blood clot in my lung from a lot of using slimming pills, and they're really bad for your lungs. I've been really in the midst of suddenly using a lot of drugs all the time. About 2007, such a long time ago. That was a really big consequence. I got blood clot in my lung, was on blood thinners, wasn't allowed to smoke weed or anything. And I was on blood thinners for 6 months, and I wasn't allowed to drink any more than 2 units of alcohol a day on those blood thinners or they wouldn't work. And the blood clot could get bigger, move to my heart or my brain, and I would die. And my 2 units a day, and you can't see me on this podcast, but I'm doing a big 5 fingers with 2 units. If I could do that in the morning and at night, I would. And sometimes that was like a Glastonbury and it was a hot cider, which was definitely about 5 units. So, I was dicing, I was dancing all the time with the danger of death, but it wasn't stopping me using. And then after this 6 months of warfarin, just going back to the blood clot in my lung, I was straight back using, more than before probably. So it had these consequences that would scare me, but I would just dodge them, because no matter what, I was going to carry on using. And then the final consequence, potentially, was... And at that time, actually, when that consequence happened, when I had the heart checks and stuff in 2015, stopped for a bit. I did come into a 12-step recovery program, but I didn't really get it. Didn't think it was for me. Gave up cocaine for 6 months. Was still drinking and smoking weed every day. Thought I was amazing. But then went back out, not even out because I wasn't in, but then certainly, carried on using much, much more. And then 5 years ago, so when I came in, got sober again for the final time, God willing, I was getting health consequences again. So it was really only the health stuff that were the reasons why I didn't think, because I was in denial that anything else was going on, that I didn't realise I was using substances to just cope with life, because I've been doing it every day for 30 years or longer if you count the food.
This so reminds me, there's this famous phrase in the book, many phrases, famous phrases in the book, of course, in the AA book, but there's one that says that to the alcoholic, his alcoholic life, I'm paraphrasing, his alcoholic life seems like the only normal one. He can't differentiate the truth from the false. And that just really sounds like that, doesn't it? That is that we only know this is the way life is. We view it through that prism, and there's no other outside reality, or not much of it.
Exactly that. And mainly because I'd never had I never wanted to give up. I never thought, apart from having to give up a bit around that time where I was on blood thinners, which was just annoying. And I was still, doing some things. I was still drinking a little bit every day. And I'd do dry January and sober October, but all those months I would just smoke more weed and do more coke in those months. So I never had a day sober from when I was about 18 to 48, which is scary. So like you say, that's all I knew. That's the only way I knew. That was the only life, the only me I knew. So yeah, it's quite a big thing when you, and then that's the fear of the unknown. That's where the first time I thought, God, I need to get sober. The idea certainly of complete abstinence was like, no way, why would I do that? I certainly haven't got a problem with alcohol. and then realizing that, yeah, of course I've got a problem with alcohol. Some people say, if you haven't got a problem with alcohol, then it shouldn't be a problem to stop. And you go, oh, holy hell. And you realize that, yeah, of course. Or alcohol for me, it was like breathing. Drugs and other stuff was like talking, if that makes any sense. Alcohol was always there. And I would put it down a bit for dieting reasons, for losing weight. In all this time of this 20 years of being 30 to 50, we were talking before earlier about how I would gain and lose the same 5 stone. And I never thought food was a problem. But then when I did this work that we do around the 12 steps, and you do a kind of a timeline, I could connect that to times in my life that were fearful or were out of control or were emotion, like I lost my father, I had lost my marriage, or, I broke my marriage. And all those times had this perfect picture correlation of gaining all this weight in trauma, then losing it all. And then, that's quite hard to manage too. And then gaining it all, you can just, it's textbook.
Yeah, it reflects my story as well, I have to say. It's interesting, isn't it, that I hear this quite a bit, that some people come into the rooms because they say that drugs stop working, right? And they were faced with an incredible crisis and they came to the rooms. And then there's others, perhaps a bit like yourself, who come in, you don't really want to stop, but the consequences, you want to stop the consequences.
That's exactly it. I didn't want to stop because I couldn't imagine life without it. But I thought, I think I've got to stop because I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Every time I snorted a line, I was getting this searing pain in my head. So it'd gone from the heart chest pains to this searing pain in my head. And I was like, oh God, every time I do a line, I'm feeling like I'm going to... And I was getting this dizziness as well. So yeah, a couple of little mini rock bottoms were... I'll tell you the story. It makes me shudder, actually. I do wedding flowers on the side of my job. And I do wedding flowers and I take it all on and it's like a 2-day thing. And I quite often will use drugs medicinally to stay up because it's me that's doing the job. And I remember having drunk a lot because I was in some awkward arguing situation with this guy I was seeing. So drinking a lot, but I had to do this wedding. So I was doing quite a lot of coke and I was doing these flowers. And I suddenly couldn't stand up. I suddenly felt really faint. And I just had to be lying down. I lived in a house share at the time and I said to my housemates, look, I'm going to go and lie down. Can I leave my door open? So this bride needs wedding flowers and it was in 2 days' time. I'd started quite early, which is very unusual for me. I said to my housemates, I need to just down tools and go in and lie down. Can you just check on me in a few hours? And here's the bride's number, because if I die, or if if I ever get to hospital, the bride we need to have a second person to do these wedding flowers. Not like, holy shit, I need to stop using drugs. I'm like, can you just keep a check on me? Because if I die, the bride needs to get flowers from somebody else, And then the next day, I was alive. Yay, go me, I was still alive. Did more flowers. Next night, I'm still using coke to stay up because it turns out I am completely powerless. I don't want to die. I certainly don't want to let this woman down with her wedding flowers. But I'm still there going, housemates, can you just check that I'm alive still? I mean, it's just insane when you think about it.
Mm.
And I clearly wasn't very well, and it was the mix of drink and drugs. That happened, came and went. Then a few weeks later, I really did have the same kind of thing. And actually looking back, I'd had similar things, but not really flagged them. But where I'd had lots to drink and then some coke, and I literally would be like, I need to lie down, I'm going dizzy. But when I would close my eyes, it was like I was passing out. And so I couldn't close my eyes because I didn't want to pass out. This was happening for hours, and I just rang 999 on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And they came quite quickly, and they went, your heart rate. They thought I must have just had a line. I was like, no, I haven't used for about 4 hours. I've just been shaking in bed going, I can't close my eyes. And they said, your heart rate and your blood pressure are so high at the same time, your body wants to faint because it was going to have a heart attack. And I was like, shit. I still didn't give up. I got rushed to hospital. I got away with that. Again, probably back in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, now life's amazing. And it was still another year before I came and got clean.
Mm.
I probably did stop Coke a bit. I think I found that then if I had one line, and it would be a fat one, that was okay. I didn't get the pains in my head and I didn't get the dizziness. And then I'd have a one line in the morning and one line at night. And I'd be like, right, I can have 2 lines a day and not die. It is insane when I articulate that and talk about that. That is nuts for somebody who never wanted to die. So they were real rock bottoms, thinking, I still can't stop. And I've been told already that your body's doing this thing because it wants to probably have a heart attack. And I thought, I don't want to die. And there's me racking out another line. So my last line was really a pitiful, little line. I'm getting a headache. Some really, also some real class moments were, at my friend's little 1-year-old's party where I'm on it already. And just a little girl or some little kid at the party is trying to get in the toilet door. And I'm trying to line up, and put my lipstick back on. And just hating myself, thinking, what are you like? And I'm 47 at that point, And some other rock bottoms, I'm at a family friend's wedding and I've drunk too much champagne and haven't had Coke, so I've drunk far too much, of course. And I've woken up in my own vomit, and I've had to get the rug. And I did somebody else's wedding flowers and I stayed over and I've woken up in my own vomit. And that's in my 40s. Yeah. And the fear and the shame and the guilt and the, I'm disgusting of all that, I think just made me use more and almost try and punish myself with more using, which is insane, isn't it?
You sort of answered our question 4, which is, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
Never considered suicide, and I never wanted to die. But I was doing all the things. I was going about the right way to kill myself, but it was the last thing I wanted.
We've touched on it a bit in previously on our question 5, which is, what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms? So we've heard about your refreshing brand of moderation, which, I have my own equally refreshing one. And I've said it a couple of times on here that, if you think you're clever because you start using early in the day, and you're taking a line stone cold sober at 7, 8, 9 a.m. in the morning, you think that you're really clever, then you've got a problem. So, any other enlightening bits of perhaps moderation or other things that you tried?
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
No, because I literally never wanted to stop. And I thought, why? I'll stop if I want to. I just never wanted to. And then when I thought, oh God, I need to stop a bit because I'm going to die, it didn't go very well because, like you say, I was still, with the mixing of the warfarin with the 2 units of alcohol a day. I was trying, but I was clearly not succeeding. And I really could have died in that situation. I definitely had somebody looking after me all the time, and I knew that. I got cocky with it, I think. So no, I never, apart from doing Sober October and Dry January, which certainly wasn't stopping anything because I was only stopping alcohol, that went really well because I was smoking weed every day and doing Coke every day. I was a daily user for years and years and years. And taking one thing away of my Holy Trinity, I thought it was amazing. And I thought I got the secret then, because taking one thing away that was a hangover felt fresh, felt great. I thought I got the secret. But I never ever tried any sort of sobriety proper, ever.
Speaking of Holy Trinity, our next question 6, is, did you struggle with the word God when you came into the rooms? So here you are, you've had these mini rock bottoms, you call them. You don't really want to stop using, right? But you do realize that you can't carry on using, and you come into the rooms. Did you struggle with the word God?
Yeah, I came into the rooms the first time, and all I could hear was people's stories of their really awful traumas and really awful, terrible experiences and awful situations and circumstances and sad and trauma with a capital T. And I remember thinking, they probably do need God. This sounds so arrogant. It's really arrogant.
You're in the right place for this, I
remember thinking, they probably do need a sort of God solution to this. I think, I felt not a good enough addict. I didn't feel like I had a bad enough life. And I thought I was an imposter in the rooms. I thought I don't deserve to have a seat in here because I haven't had the lives these guys have had. And I haven't lost my home and my job and my family, and I haven't injected, all this stuff that makes you go, no, I haven't got a problem. So I was like, whoa, and the word God on the wall, I was like, nah, I just thought they probably do need God, but I don't think I need God. No. So yeah, the word God just made me feel not part of and feel a bit less than. And, off I went with my willpower and thinking my willpower was fine and didn't go very well.
This brings us to something super interesting. Because I had similar experiences in that, one, I didn't roll with the G word. That was the first and foremost, right? But also, there is a sort of, I'm looking for the right word here, there is a sort of chasm almost between those addicts where their addiction was really visible to the outside world. So they might have lost their homes, they might have lost their teeth, they might have lost their jobs, their marriage, their everything, right? And those who haven't, right? Yet, of course, right? Because those are what we call the yets, right? So I haven't lost my house yet, haven't lost my job yet. And things like whether people inject or don't inject is one of those dividing lines. And I thought it was only me really who'd have this sort of difference that we're looking at, right? And until the day that someone came in and did a chair at my home group in Covent Garden, and they were an intravenous heroin user in the past, and they said they looked at those people who didn't also as non-addicts. And so, of course, this is what it comes down to, right? We look at the differences, don't we?
Absolutely. And before I even realised that it was nothing to do with the substance or the behaviour, and it was to do with the fact that we all are using those to cope with our emotions and our feelings and our ways to cope with life, which was a massive light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It was light bulbs every moment. It was light bulbs every meeting at that point that I went to. And then hearing people's talk, and you used to go, oh no, it's not really my story. But then actually hearing how doesn't matter about what they've taken or what their story is, hearing them talk about their emotions and how their mind works, immediately I was like, oh my God, we're all the same. It was such a great leveler. I thought, my brain is made exactly like your brain and your brain and your brain. We might have had completely different routes to this seat in this meeting. We might have taken completely different drugs, but we're exactly the same. And that just felt amazing. I first came into meetings thinking, full of guilt and shame and secrecy and I'm disgusting. But hearing people talk quite joyfully and in quite a light way about their capers and about what they got up to and about their using and about this madness, I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. It was huge. And then also, they say, don't they, it's like from the squat to the op and from left to right and side to side and top to bottom. Just like cancer, this illness, and I do think it's an illness. I do think it's certainly a condition, and I call it an illness. It doesn't care. We are all from completely different worlds, and we've got it. Doesn't matter who we are, and that's the wonderful thing about finding your people. I thought I was so alone. I thought I was the only one, I thought I was disgusting, dirty junkie, no willpower. And then when you find out that we just have no willpower, us lot, it's liberating. But yeah, I separated myself hugely. And it's funny about the word God. I'll go back quickly to this. The word God, I was Church of England educated. I spent time in a church because we did a church in our village and we do sort of flowers in the church. And I wasn't scared of God. But when I came into the rooms and saw God, I thought, God, I need to be part of something. I don't want to follow the crowd. I don't want to be one, it's just fear. But my perception of that was we all need to be the same and follow God and be like a cult. Because I just didn't get it. I wasn't listening. That God is a higher power of your own understanding. And actually, all through my life, I felt there was something there, something helping me, like karma, something rewarding me, something that I was doing, good fairy, bad fairy, angel, devil. There was always that was strong in me. And towards the end of my using and the end of my crazy madness, I really felt that I was sort of turning my back on this thing that was helping me, this thing that was giving me the good luck when I didn't deserve it. So then when I got to be doing the work that we do, and I kept an open mind, and I would just hear about, just do the next right thing, just try and think of love, not hate, try and do forgiveness, not, anger. That for me was my higher power, my higher consciousness. And at the start, I didn't know what to call it. My sponsor that we get in these rooms was like, don't even worry about it. So we get to that bit in the steps. And that was my experience. The more I was trying to behave better, the more I was trying to talk to something, to ask, pray for no cravings, pray to keep me clean today, pray to make me, I need to get to that, I don't want to go out to this meeting, but I'm just going to do it. That thing that kept me kind of almost like a ball in the air became my God. And I call it God now. And I talk to God now. And it's insane. And as soon as I realised, because I was comparing myself to other people that would call their God a name and would be in a church. I was like, mine's not in a church and mine doesn't have a name. I was constantly comparing myself to others, feeling like I wasn't doing it right. Oh, and if I'm not doing it right, I can't stay sober. I'm getting very worried about that. And as soon as I would just hear your own God or your own idea of God or good or love or higher power is as individual as your own fingerprint, I just chilled out a bit and I was like, fine, I'm going to have my own experience. And my God is in a church and my God's sitting here with me now and my God's at the gym and my God's in a rave. God is just a feeling. It's just a feeling for me. So God really freaked me out at the start and it made me walk out the door, really. The word God and the word abstinence made me turn heel and not want to do any of this stuff and certainly not want sobriety until I came back in after really dragging myself down, scraping myself through my rock bottom, really, till 5 years ago. And I was all ears. And I was like, yeah, talk to me about God.
Wonderful. Yeah. Question 7 is, how do you experience your higher power today? What are your God moments?
I get God moments all the time. And at the start of it, I would be like, oh, God moment. And I'd take a picture of it and send it to a fellow or send it to my sponsor or just like, oh. And they happen as often now. I'm just so much more used to them. I have a God number, which is really strange. It was always a number it was like a spiritual number I have that's mine and I see it. At moments when I'm feeling a bit wibbly and a bit lost, bang, 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 it's there all day. I sort of talk to my higher power like it's a presence. So I feel like I'll have a God moment when something wonderful happens and I don't mean like, I feel like when things go well, I have a God moment, but there's definitely that going on. I feel like, well, this must be right. And my God moments are around I write a list of things I'm grateful for every night in bed and I've not missed a day since I came in sober. And that for me it was where the whole day kind of comes to a close. It's like so grateful for so many things. Sometimes I'm not living in a war-torn country, but other times it's grateful I found a really nice coconut milk. It's just facile things some of it. But my higher power moments or my God moments are all the time like nature. I'm looking out. There's some trees that are just coming to leaf now in my view as doing this podcast. And I'm like, the universe is amazing. God is amazing. Or I could be on a dance floor. I'll go out dancing a lot, much more than I did when I used to use, hilariously. Or maybe I'm just more present. And I get rushes of goosebumps and joy. And that's certainly God's with me. Yeah, God's with me all the time. And when he's not, or when it's not, I have to dig deep and then I see something or somebody else say something and I have to be like, isn't that a beautiful thing? And I just throw a bit of love on somebody or feel very grateful. So yeah, long answer to your short question. God moments take many forms, but they're always there.
Wonderful. It just had a bit of a flashback here of just how much I have got used to and participate in speaking about higher power and about God this way, which wasn't, as I've said before, my natural habitat when I came in. And the very first times when I was sitting in the rooms and people would start talking and they would say things that you just said now. It's like, I speak to my God all the time, or my God speaks to me all the time. And I was like, are they still high? Yeah. What's happening here? And it's just wonderful to see that there's been development there. And I think it's something that for me certainly came just with time. First I relaxed into it. Then I found my own experience. And with that, I found I could share my own experience around this as well. Great. Question 8 is, which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I mean, I guess step one, it took me a long time to get because I was in denial that I was powerless. But no, once I was in and I knew, I thought, I've got step one down because I know I'm powerless because I don't want to die and I keep using still. I wouldn't say any of them were difficult. They all felt really organic, really natural, really cathartic, like big work, because I never wanted to look at myself, of course. I'd had therapy when I had an eating disorder, but I wanted to run straight away from that and I put it down. Step 4 for me, which is where you make a list of you make your moral inventory. So you make a list, for those of you who don't know, you kind of make a list of everything, whether it's people, places, concepts, anything that's made you just shudder, anything that's given you a horrible, feeling. We call it resentment. So anything that's just not sat well with you, anything that you're holding that's giving you an ick, basically. Sitting doing that or knowing that was coming was a bit like, I don't know if I've got any. With being the kind of people pleaser that I always was, I internalize stuff. If things were annoying me or aggravating me, I wouldn't show it because I want to be this, I was like a swan or a duck that was gliding around life with a face full of makeup on, happy face on. All the externals were fine and my legs were just going, literally in panic. So on the surface, I didn't want anyone to think that I was ruffled or I could get angry or get irritated. So I was just like, everyone thought I was super chilled and super lovely because I wanted them to think that. So if anybody angered me, my pride was so big, I wouldn't show them, I thought, I lost my father, I lost my marriage, but no, everything's fine. I realised that was the person I was, because I was fine, because I was having a line, I was having a wine, I was having a weed, spliff. Didn't realise that everything was fine because I was medicating on it immediately or constantly. So to have to look and go, right, what things did really anger me or what are my resentments? I had to really dig deep. But as soon as my sponsor said to me, because my head was still spaghetti, I was like, how do I look at 40 odd years of my life and, how do I scrape through that spaghetti? How do I find the bits? And she said, maybe just think of chunks of time. So think of school, think of college, think of the time when you moved out, And as soon as I kind of compartmentalized it and just did it in bite size, and I really asked my higher power, I really was like, just dig deep. What was my real honesty? Because I was living my whole life dishonestly by saying I was fine because I was not fine. But I was fine because I was internalizing it, doing behaviors on it, using drugs and drink on it, spending money. So I was actually living through some of those emotions of those things that I was bringing up and writing down. I was actually feeling those emotions sometimes for the first time. And some of those things would have been things that had happened when I was a teenager or things when I was 20 or 30. And I was writing them down at the age of 48, 49 and having to really cry on them or having to really get really angry on them. Yeah. And luckily I had a sponsor that would talk every day and I could, I was held throughout that. But that was... I guess it was, here's me go, no, it wasn't difficult. It was difficult because I was feeling those emotions for the first time because those emotions at the time didn't pass go. They went straight into self-medication. So that was, it was an amazing step. It was my favourite step because it was the most, the most scoop out step, the most, this is really me. Come on, this is really my truth. I always say it's like the $1 billion therapy that you get from just doing it in the book, doing it yourself, doing it with a sponsor, doing it with my higher power. So that was difficult to go through, but it needed to be gone. I was holding all that stuff. It needed to come out. So my favourite step and the most difficult step.
Therefore.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's just reflecting on what you were saying at the beginning, that step 1 really was the most difficult one because it took you, 25 years or something to get to get that step. And that is so true for me and for many people who come into recovery in that way. And that's why perhaps the book also spends, about a third or so on step 1, right? The doctor's opinion, Bill's story, more about alcoholism, all those bits, that are just really about identifying the alcoholic or the addict.
Absolutely. It's the admitting. And it's the accepting. You can admit it I would admit it. I knew I probably had a problem, but I would almost resigned myself to that fact. And when I tried to give up the just a Coke only, and then when I went back in and did it much more, I almost used more on the fact that, I'm a dirty junkie, I can't give up, I'm powerless, or I'm an addict. I almost used on that fact, used to make myself feel better that I couldn't stop. I mean, imagine that. It's nuts.
I had that acceleration, come to think of it. There was a podcast at the time, around 2019, 2020, BBC podcast called Hooked, the Unexpected Addict or something like that. It was a really good podcast. And I listened to that podcast. And in that podcast, while I was still sort of like, in that space, I have a problem, but I don't really have a problem. I have a problem, but I'm not homeless. That space. And yet, my using was just, the binges were getting worse and worse. And, it had gone from a 1 day to 2 day bender to 3 day benders, and recovering from those, listening to this podcast. And then somehow there was a recognition that, I think I also have this problem. And that really accelerated my using for some odd reason. So yes, you're absolutely right. It does that.
Yeah, almost frightened of yourself, almost fearful, almost just makes it go away, doesn't it? More oblivion, because I didn't want to face anything.
Yeah.
And I was only addicted. I could never say I was addicted to any particular substance, or never. If something makes me feel nice or is pleasurable, I just have to do it, and I can't stop doing it. That's what I realised.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it makes it all go away, I'm addicted to oblivion. And if it makes it all go away, and sometimes you're escaping yourself, aren't you? Always I was escaping myself, but certainly around that, oh God, I might have a problem, I might be an addict. Go me, I just use more.
Yeah. Over to our question 9, which is, which character defects give you most trouble?
Arrogance and pride and ego. Self-centered. I mean, they all pop up. I feel like you clear them, you ask them to remove, you spot them a mile off, but they still come up. We don't become saints or Mother Teresa in this, which I was relieved to hear. I was still going to be a bit defective, but we spot them and I can laugh at myself. So I can get a bit prideful, I can want to be seen and heard, with having, I guess from years and years of having low self-esteem, I was always, super extrovert, but no confidence whatsoever. So, and I very much changed by doing this stuff, and I've become quiet, and I've become, I don't need to prove anything because I've cleared all that shit. And, I'm a different person now. But sometimes I'll feel a bit less. And maybe at work, if I know I've not really, I'm a bit of a procrastinator at work, and I've been doing the job I do for a long time, and sometimes I think, God, I maybe need to change my job because I'm not giving it my absolute 100%, because actually work doesn't define me anymore, which is a game changer. It always did. So sometimes when I feel like, maybe I need to, have not really been my best me at work, then I'll probably overcompensate and really try and be heard and show off a bit of work. And so that comes up. I think pride and ego comes up, but I soon spot it, and in my sort of end of the day, review of the day, I'll be like, just don't do that as much tomorrow. Don't be as much of a dick tomorrow.
Sounds familiar. Question 10, what is the best thing recovery has given you?
So hard to say one best thing.
So many best things.
Yeah. Just ease and comfort in my skin. The washing machine had stopped. There's all this. I feel like I do talk 100 miles an hour, but believe me, I used to talk at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like, I feel like there's all this space in my head and space in my life and time in my life, because I spent all the time thinking about my next hit, or am I high enough? Am I, my men so self-focused, so self-absorbed on my, on my physical highness, sidewaysness, stoneness, pissness. Am I okay? Just survival in that whole drug-addled life that we lead. That once you put that down and you do the work on yourself, the presence I have to be like a better person and to help other people and to be a good daughter and a good auntie and a good citizen. Just the ease and comfort in being me, just the self-acceptance. It's okay to be me. Peace of mind, I guess that is, isn't it?
Huge.
huge. I often, whenever I hear this, we almost sort of shrug that off, you know. I say, yeah, peace of mind, you know, just feeling freedom. Oof, it's a lot.
Massive.
Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict? Which is almost two questions in one, really, if we're being honest. But what are your thoughts?
So to say to a newcomer, don't be scared. It's lovely in here. We all feel what you feel at this moment. Everyone that you see has felt like that before. We've all been you, and look at us, look at some of us, whatever. Just don't be afraid. Just get some faith and some hope, because it works. This stuff works. And I thought like I'd come in and I'd be sitting in circles, you know, repenting my sins, wearing hair shirts, doing yoga, drinking herbal tea, meditating. I do yoga and drink herbal tea and meditate, and they're fantastic, but I do a lot of other things as well. And I certainly don't sit in a circle looking at my navel, contemplating my sins. You know, I thought that life would be boring, and I thought that it would be about, you know, the word abstinence is such a negative word. What I didn't know was that my life began the day I got sober and did the work. I felt like I've been given a second life, so a second stab at life. So to a newcomer, life is amazing in here. You won't think it's a day, but just be patient and just put one foot in front of the other, and listen to people that are trying to help you, because we've all been you. What was the other bit of the question?
What would you say to someone wondering if they're an addict?
I would say, have you ever tried to stop, and maybe stop but not been able to stay stopped? You know, how has sort of giving up before, how successful has that been? You know, we say the only requirement is the desire to stop using or drinking. Doesn't matter what floor you get off on the road to your rock bottom. I didn't think I had a problem, but I knew that if I'm so conscious about what time I can have a drink or what time I can go off and have a little spliff around the back of work, like you said at the start of this talk, that's not normal. You know, we normalise things, don't we? If you're using or drinking when you know you don't want to and you just can't not do it, I feel like for me that was when I knew I had a problem. We call it using against our will or drinking against our will. When you try and go, I'm not going to do it today, and you do, we're pretty powerless when we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings me to the last question today, which is, what do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Welcome home. I feel like I'm home now. I feel like as soon as I got in touch with my higher power, I was home, and got into the rooms, I was home. Somewhere I've been searching for, you know, my whole life. But when I meet my higher power, let's party. Because who knows what's going to be ahead then? Then we're really in space.
Wonderful. Vicky, thank you so much for coming around, for sharing your experience, strength and hope. You've been so courageous and so open, so honest. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Brilliant. We're still rolling.
It's so cathartic, isn't it? Because sometimes when I do a chair, you just forget some of the stuff. You forget some of the. It's so good having focus questions, because it's pertinent, isn't it?
I think it's really important that we have this thing that we just forget stuff that is just unforgettable, really. But we want to forget it, or I don't know how it works really, but we forget it, and
all that time, because all that time we're still present, living our lives, but you know, having just medicating for all those years. I felt like I've lost 20 years, but what can you do? I lost 25 years, really. Sometimes I just go, yeah. And my sponsor will go, well, that was only using. I'm like, yeah. Oh, yeah, no. But then it almost makes me feel like I'm 16 again. Like it's in a nice way, I feel like, because I missed so much of my life in terms of I drank through it, used through it all, was not really present through it all, saw it through a, dirty window. And because I didn't know how to form emotions and deal with situations except by using or drinking, I stayed really emotionally immature. So actually I'm 53, but I feel I'm almost sometimes embarrassed to say my age, because people probably go, wow, you're really childlike. But I am childlike, and I've learned to just go, it's okay, because I haven't had kids, which is another thing maybe which has kept me almost, I haven't had the responsibilities.
No.
Haven't had to be. Not to say that people with kids have had to, but you're accountable to somebody else. You maybe have to do a bit more serious thinking. I've just dodged it, and I feel like it just kept me really young. Using for so many years kept me really young in my head.
Yeah.
Immature.
Yeah.
So I do feel really young now, because I'm started where I left off.
Yeah. It's interesting that, isn't it, that concept that we often talk about, which is that when you get sober, you start really, you're an evolution that was stopped when you began using. So in other words, I started using really seriously at 15, 16. And in a way, many parts of my life, when I came to recovery, I was like a 15, 16-year-old, sort of that rebelliousness, that sort of constant back and forwards between being just totally hopeless and then rebellious and then this and that. And also certainly the way I viewed the world and the way I looked at a higher power, at God and all those things, definitely just real teenage stuff, And like what you were saying, which I thought is so real to me, is that you feel that you've got a second chance. I also feel that, in storytelling terms, they call it the redemption arc. Right, and I very much feel like this as well, that I've been given a second chance here. It
is redemption, isn't it? It's delivery from evil. It really is like. And so many times I felt like I've been on the brink of death. I mean, looking back, I definitely was.
Definitely.
9 lives, 900 lives. It feels like something's gone. Wait. We need you. We need you for a purpose on this earth. And I really believe that.
And that's why those 25 years clearly also weren't lost in that way, because you can use them now, to help out the newcomer. Brilliant. I mean, did you feel that you said everything you want to say? Anything? Yeah? That you left out or anything?
I said a lot.
No? Okay, well, I've got one really, the most important question really that we didn't address, which was, which one of the Duran 5 did you fancy the most?
John Taylor, all the way.
All day long.
All day long.
Total man crush on Taylor. Yeah, definitely the coolest one of the lot. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for coming around.
So much, Silvio. It's just been just dreamy, been so cathartic and lovely, and to be in this wonderful space. My stomach, I don't know if you heard my stomach rumble on the mic, but yeah, lovely. I saw Duran Duran for the first time ever about 3 years ago at Hyde Park, and I had high hopes, and I was like, what if they're terrible? They were so good.
Oh,
I'm seeing them again this year.
That's a relief.
Thank God they were good.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Vicky.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-step recovery program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not-for-profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.